Welcome to In the News for May 2022. A lot of 20s in there. Good morning. I am Brett Burney from AppsandLaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Hey, I'm on the road again, Jeff, but it's okay. I don't want to miss, although I know we got the summer coming up, so there might be one or two in there that we'll have to see how we can work it out, but I'm always happy to talk with you every week. A lot of good stuff going on this week. You, first of all, commented on some rumors. We don't like doing rumors a whole lot, but Mark Gurman, who is at Bloomberg and is well known for kind of like reporting on some unannounced things or projects maybe that Apple is coming up. And here's one that I got to tell you, I don't know if I'm very excited about this, Jeff, but I've heard a lot of people talking about that Apple is working on a virtual reality headset, and I've never used any of these, but some interesting stuff here. We'll see. I mean, Mark reported that it was well enough along that it was shown to Apple's board of directors, right?
Yeah, that's probably the most interesting feature here. I'm not a big fan of talking about rumors because they so often don't come to pass. But I feel like there's two projects that there is so much smoke with that we know that there's fire at Apple. They are definitely working on some sort of a headset, whether it's ultimately glasses or goggles, and they're definitely working on something with the car. I mean, we just know that
the car,
because of all the hires. Who knows when it will ever see the light of the day? But they're definitely working on something. So what I thought was the interesting news this week is for Mark Gurman to report on something as specific as it was shown off to the board of directors.
Right.
That's the sort of thing that, like, that would be a bizarre thing to just pull out of left field if it was completely made up. So I have to assume that he has a source that it actually was. And again, I don't know Apple's, timetable for how they, at what point do you show something to the board of directors? Mark points out in this article that when Apple first debuted Siri, they showed it off to the board of directors shortly before it became public in the iPhone 4S, I believe it was. That was a long time ago. But so, I mean, but who knows what the timetable for this one is. But it would be interesting if the product is actually pretty close to Apple showing something off, even if it's not for sale until next year, which is what Mark says. But to get back to your point, I share your skepticism of, this product. Apple's not going to do something. They've got very smart people. They must think that there's something, that there's some there, that people are going to actually spend a significant amount of money for this thing. I find it hard to believe I would spend much of my day walking around with something on me that's very cumbersome. At the same time, I remember one of my favorite books from the last decade that I read was a book called A Demon by Daniel Suarez, where he talks about a futuristic world in which people wear something that looks just like regular glasses, but it would sort of show you in the top corner, this is the person you're talking to. This is some information about them. So, I think that there is something there, and I'm just really, really curious to see what Apple comes out with. And maybe they would come out with something, and you and I were like, there's no way we would ever spend money on that. But, but then again, the first versions, I mean, you think about the original Apple Watch, it was so slow and everything else. And here we are now, and the Apple Watch works pretty well. So maybe Apple just needs to get something out there and then iterate on it. And then maybe a few years from now, we'll have something interesting. So I have a lot of skepticism about how this product would work and if it's something we would want. But the real news, the interesting story for me is that maybe we're close to seeing something. We'll see.
Maybe we've been burned in the past, right? I remember several years ago, Google had, I think they called it Google Glass, which was this pretty cool looking pair of glasses, but there were so many weird and odd things about it that, the first iteration I know was a little bit funny looking, but I just know people were saying that it doesn't work right. I mean, it was nice in theory. And then here I'm showing a picture from this Mark Gurman story here that, it just, when people put on these huge goggle things, I think Oculus, is probably one of the companies that has a lot of these VR headsets.
It's Facebook,
exactly. And people, just look very awkward and weird, and maybe it's just leaving a bad taste in my mouth. Because I will tell you, I was talking on a group just last week that I'm a member of, and several of the people were all talking about they just got, I can't remember the name of one of those, just like the Rift 2 or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but 3 or 4 people had purchased one. I think, you can get it for a couple $100s or so off of Amazon, and they were just talking about how fun it was. One was doing a roller coaster game. There was somebody else that was, they were talking about like drawing a square around so that, you don't bump into walls and stuff. And I've never yet experienced talking about a virtual reality headset like I had experienced that last week, and I didn't have anything to add. I was just kind of like, wow, really? I mean, is it, is it that fun? So like you said, to your point, maybe it's coming. I think maybe right now we just can't imagine what it would be like. You also linked to the story from John Gruber, where he says, he goes, I can't imagine myself, like you said, Jeff, like wearing a big pair of goggles for 8 hours a day, walking around. But, I mean, several years ago, I wouldn't imagine that I would have a smartwatch or even, frankly, an iPhone or an iPad that I'd be walking around with. And like you said, it just evolves. And we've said this over and over and over. Apple's not the first to present a product, but when they decide they want to go all in on something, then it becomes the best. And maybe that's what's going to happen with the headset.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
We're not done with Apple news yet. You linked to several other great stories. I saw this several play. This is pretty fascinating. Apple has always done such a great job on providing accessibility features both in the iPhone and on the watch. And so John Voorhees at Mac Stories reported on Apple have a long list of adding some additional accessibility features here. This is pretty fun. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff in here, like door detection and some live captioning. Incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's neat stuff. Apple's going to have their developer conference, WWDC, in just a few weeks. And when they have that, they're going to show us the next version of the operating system. My guess is they took some of those items from, it makes sense to talk about them today because this apparently was, accessibility week. And so it was a way to sort of focus on just because the accessibility features, because in a few weeks, they'll probably get lost in the shuffle with the bigger features. But there's some really, really interesting things in here. There's the one that, if you're blind or with low vision and you're getting closer to a door, you can actually use an iPhone and the iPhone will see the door. It will communicate to you, how far you are to the door that you're getting closer. Right. But what's really interesting is, using AI type technology, it will tell you this is a door you push, or this is a door that you pull, or here's a sign that's on the door or right next to the door, and it'll read it to you. I'm like, wow, this is interesting because, I mean, my vision's, okay, and I still sometimes mess up with doors. Is it a push or is it a pull and stuff like that? So, I would definitely be interesting for the iPhone, et cetera, to figure that stuff automatically. Another one that was really interesting, and there's a bunch of them in here, but they have the ability to have captions for pretty much any video on an iPhone or an iPad. Anything that's playing a video, whether you're streaming a movie from Netflix or whether you are, watching something that you recorded yourself or any other type of video source, even live video. If you're having like a FaceTime conversation with you, it can do live captions. And Google's been doing a version of this for a while. Wow. Even Microsoft has it, and Microsoft Teams that will do live captions. We've seen other companies have done this. Apple would not be the first, but if Apple could do it throughout the entire device, I think, first of all, that would be fantastic for people that are hard of hearing. But just like any accessibility features really are useful for everybody in some way. And I mentioned in my post today that I sometimes watch movies or TV shows on my TV, and I turn on live captions, not because I can't hear the words, but just because maybe with the accents, it's a little hard to understand them, or maybe it's such a loud background. So, sometimes they're annoying. Sometimes I turn them on, but I love having the feature, even if it was designed for people that have hearing issues. I enjoy using it as well. And likewise, if the iPhone had the ability to provide live captions of anything being spoken from any video source,
incredible.
I bet you I would use that at some point. So I love that Apple's doing this stuff for all the right reasons, and so that it filters down for everybody. It's neat stuff.
So these features are not available yet, right? They were just sort of announcing it like it's coming very soon.
My prediction is sometime in the next year. It may be the first version of iOS 16 that comes out in the fall, or maybe it'll be 16.1 or 0.2. But at some point, between now and May of next year, these should be coming out.
This is just a quick thing I wanted to note on here, because we've talked about this before. With the Apple Watch now, you can actually do gestures with your hand while you're wearing an Apple Watch, which some of these are already available, right? It's something like you can pinch your fingers together or clench your fist or so, and in some cases that will create an action or do something on the watch. And it looks like that they're improving some of these as well. Like it says right here, if you want to start a meditation from Apple Fitness Plus, you can double pinch your fingers, and I guess because of the way that your tendons or something within your hand works, that will trigger an action on the watch. That is just, I haven't played with this yet, but that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's neat stuff.
Good stuff. Keep going, Apple. We need more of that. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, we talked about how AT&T was going to be raising their rates, and we weren't so happy about it. But it sounds like they're not alone. It looks like some of the other carriers are going to follow suit. You had a link to Verizon, where they're going to up their bill just a little bit. And I love this little bit of a tongue-in-cheek here on the Verge story that you linked to. It says, file this one under ambiguous fee increases.
What's funny, just to sort of juxtapose the two, when AT&T did it, and we talked about it a week or two ago, we talked about how they were going to raise rates on the older plans to encourage people to move towards the unlimited plans, which are a little bit more expensive.
Right.
So
yes, that's right.
That is understandable. What the Verge is making fun of on the Verizon stuff is the explanations that they have for the rates are, economic adjustment charge.
Yeah,
it's like what? Right. It's almost like they randomly pick two words of the dictionary and put the charge.
You're
on
making
it.
that up.
It's it's the blue sunset charge. It's
right.
What do you who even knows? They're just charging more money. Just say that you're raising your rates. Don't give it some
don't try to
charges.
Cover it up. Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, I don't have a lot of patience for this. I mean, I know it's just the way that it is. I mean, even when I'm traveling today, I remember I was talking to the hotel, and it's like I'm here for 3 days, and every day is a different rate. And of course it goes up. And I'm asking the front desk, I'm like, okay, I don't really understand, like, why are these rates? And they don't have a good explanation, or at least not an explanation that satisfies me. And it's just like there's so many fees that just throw in, like they throw in a fee. Anyway, I don't have a lot of patience for this, and I don't know what we can really do about it as consumers other than speak up. But if you're on, we were talking about AT&T last time, and you're going to raise your rates, and if you're on Verizon, you can't get away from it either. And it looks like that's going to be happening on that as well. Now, we talked also, I think last week, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, one of your tips was the speed test app, which is fantastic. I use that all the time. But the company, it's Ookla, I think, right? Is that how you say it? Ookla, Ookla. I just love saying that anyway. They had a neat story that you linked to this week as well, where they were rating some of the best Wi-Fi, or the fastest free Wi-Fi at airports, not just in the United States, but around the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that people are using the speed test app all the time, and I'm sure travelers especially use it to test the speed. So they have all this data of, how fast the Wi-Fi networks are at different airports around the world. So it was interesting for them to come out with the report. Perhaps it's not surprising that San Francisco's airport, being a very tech, area, was so good. Seattle next, which sort of makes sense with Microsoft being up there, I suppose. But, they have a list of the other ones that were really good: Dallas, Chicago, and stuff. And then outside of the United States, I think Dubai was the best, and then Amsterdam, and then Charles de Gaulle in Paris. So it's interesting. I don't always sometimes I use public Wi-Fi at airports. Sometimes I just get a little nervous because I know that they're so heavily used that you just never know if somebody could use some hacker software to snoop into what you're doing. If I have an option to use cellular, then that's just what I do. But of course, if you live in the United States and you're traveling internationally, you may not have a cellular plan, or you may need to get a local SIM somewhere else. So then you are going to use Wi-Fi. But it's interesting to see this ranking for people that travel a lot. I'm sure that they will have their own viewpoint on which one of these Wi-Fis are faster than others. What's also particularly interesting, if you look at the chart, there's such a wide discrepancy. I mean, and I guess we've all experienced this in real life too. Sometimes you're using public Wi-Fi in an airport and it's like, wow, this is pretty good. And then sometimes it is dismally slow. And I've certainly experienced that before.
A word of caution I tell people too. One of the reasons I don't typically use free or public Wi-Fi, even at airport, mostly I see it at airports, but really anywhere, is that pretty much anybody could set up like a rogue wireless hotspot, and they will call it free airport Wi-Fi. Right. And so when you log on with your phone, or when you see the available Wi-Fi hotspots, you say, oh, well, there's, free airport Wi-Fi. And you think, well, that's the one I'm going to join. And it's not always. It could be rogue. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody does that all the time, but I don't trust something if it's so detailed exactly like what it says, if some of that makes sense. And then other times I've been burned too, Jeff, and I don't know if this is still the way it is, but it'll be maybe free Wi-Fi or airport Wi-Fi, and you log on, and then of course it only gets you to another page where you have to pay. I think Boingo hotspots and some of those. So, but I do like the fact that Ookla did this, because some airports do today at least provide free public Wi-Fi. Just make sure again that you're logging on to the right one. They even talked about it here that it's, Wi-Fi airport standard or what it says. And then lastly, quickly, I just thought this was interesting that the report also said that if you go into a lounge at the airport, those are a little bit different. I've sometimes been known to I can't get into the lounge, but I'll sit outside the wall, the door, and sometimes log on to that Wi-Fi hotspot if I can. And it has been faster, but they lock that down sometimes, so I can't always do that. But if you have a chance to get into a lounge, this report is talking about that. There usually is faster Wi-Fi there, so that's another option that you have.
I suppose we should also mention that if you use public Wi-Fi a lot, whether it be at an airport or somewhere else, of course, you should consider whether you want to subscribe to one of the private VPN services. And they have pluses or minuses too. I've used some of them in the past. We actually, at my own law firm, we have a little VPN service through my firm so that I can just, without paying an extra service, I can just dial into my firm and do it. So if this is a frequent part of your world, take a look at VPN. You probably already know.
Absolutely. That. Let's talk passwords now. One of our favorite topics that we always like to talk about, and even better, our favorite password manager is 1Password. And boy, if you have been on the fence about getting 1Password, today is your day. They're having a 50% off sale. And I know 1Password's getting ready to upgrade some of their apps. The Mac app, I think, we just upgraded, and they've even let, I think I have like the beta version on the iPhone and iPad as well. Go out and get it if you don't have one already. My goodness.
We talked recently about maybe having a passwordless future, and but that's still a little ways away. For now, you certainly need to use passwords. And even when we get to that future, I still think there's going to be a place for a password manager. So I use a password manager. If you're savvy enough to know how to turn on a podcast, then you should be able to figure out how to use a password manager.
That's right.
I don't care which one you use, but I personally love 1Password, and I've used it for a long time. So, but the price the discount right now is pretty good. I suspect it's just for like a year. I don't know how long it's for, but a personal account, which usually costs $36, $18 is pretty good. But what I really like is the family account. If you're married or have a partner or something, or others, I happily pay $60 a year for 1Password families.
Same.
But if you can get it for $30 a year, that's great, because for me, it's, and my wife and I use it not only individually, but we have things that we share between the two of us. So if she updates the password for a utility company, it's automatically updated for me, and I don't have to ask her about it. And then I have my kids on it too, and they don't use it a lot. But they do use it for, I teach them, if you want the Netflix password, you need to go into the password manager.
That's right.
That's the carrot to get them to start to use it, to put their stuff in there. So try to teach them young. So anyway, I strongly encourage it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And LastPass is probably the other one that a lot of people would use. I'll just throw that one out there. There's several of them, but to me, those are the two that I usually recommend, is 1Password and LastPass. And just quickly, Jeff, because you're always good to point this out too, and you said this the last time we talked about it, I don't use 1Password just for passwords. Correct. I've got all kinds of information in there that I just know that I need to have. It's almost like my digital fireproof safe. In other words, it's a place. It's a place where I put all kinds of information that I know. Like, for example, I take care of a lot of my my finances and stuff for my parents, and my dad that passed away. It's like there's a lot of paperwork, right? Now I don't necessarily keep all the documents in there, but I do want to make sure that I've got it separated off. Like, these are accounts from my mom, or, information about when I called somebody. You can put notes in all the passwords, and I use that little notes field a lot whenever I put in a password. For example, when I go into a service and I put a password there, sometimes it requires you to put in some security answers, right? So I put those security answers in my notes in there, because I don't, sometimes it asks different questions on that. So I just wanted to point that out. You're always good to say that too, but that's the way I use it. And I absolutely do the same thing with the family plan. I share it with my wife, and it just makes it so much easier, so that we're not emailing passwords back and forth, which is not very secure, of course, on there. So, okay,
your
that's
two-factor. I just mentioned a couple more. Your two-factor codes, it can take care of that for you.
Exactly.
And for me, anything that's just a little bit more private, whether it be some medical information for me or one of my kids or something like that, I want to put it somewhere just to remember it. And although if I put it in the Notes app, it's probably perfectly safe, like the built-in one, why not put, anything that just seems a little bit more secret to me, why not put it in a password manager? That way, even if somebody got access to my phone, they would have to go through extra barriers and not be able to get into it. Just like you say, it's just a nice, safe place to put things in the safe.
Man.
So
we could just keep going on and on. I warned everybody, it's one of our favorite topics to talk about on there. All right. So if you haven't subscribed to Apple News Plus or Apple TV Plus or Apple Arcade or any of the other services, you had a nice link here, Jeff, where Costco now will sell you a subscription. I'm not sure it's the right way to go, but anyway, it's interesting that if you are a Costco customer, here's another option for you.
I never even thought that you could get Apple services through Costco. So, and for some ways, for me, that's the story. How bizarre. And although some of them are not, just a small discount, like $5 a year off, but one of them, the Apple News service, currently, if you just want Apple News, and I don't know anybody that only wants Apple News, but if you only wanted Apple News, it's $10 a month. So that's $120 a year. Whereas through Costco, it's $90. So you save $30. So that's a real savings. But as I pointed out today, that if you're going to start to get a couple of these services, you should look at some of the Apple One bundles. Whether you do the lower end bundle or the one that I have, which is the most expensive one at $30 a month, because it includes everything, and that's actually a good way to save money. But if for some reason you don't want Apple Music, because let's say you're a Spotify customer and you don't want another one, but if you just wanted to pick or choose one or two of these services, Apple News or Apple Arcade or what's the third one in here? The Apple News, Apple Arcade, and
Apple TV,
and Apple TV Plus, of course, a really good one. This might be a way to just get that one targeted service for a little bit cheaper. Interesting.
Yeah, I would say I held off a long time going to Apple One, and you convinced me, Jeff, and I would not look back. I mean, now we're paying $30 a month, I believe, right? Because we do Premiere, but I share that across all the family. So everybody, and I got to tell you, for just even the Apple News, I didn't think that was that important, but it's just nice that it's a beautiful interface and it's well curated, and also a lot of magazines. I just was able to get like the free Men's Health magazine, and just the way that it's formatted within the Apple News app is fantastic. So obviously, I'm not trying to sell
just this week,
Apple services, but
if you're a Star Wars nerd like I am, I've always enjoyed Star Wars. There was a great cover story in, I think it was Vanity Fair this week, with all these different stories about the different Star Wars movies and series that are coming out. And again, I was just reading that on my iPad, and I get through Apple News Plus, so it was it's nice.
Fantastic. I would say, just like you, I agree. If you're going to get one of these services and you're going to get it through Costco, just consider going up to the Apple One. And just quickly, I would say it's interesting that Costco, like you said, is selling these subscriptions. I remember many years ago, Costco was selling, of course, a lot of Apple products. And then there was a brouhaha. I don't remember how long ago this was, but Costco stopped selling all Apple products. It was almost like a year and a half. And I remember, because I was upset, I wanted to go into a store and get something, because they sometimes will give you a little bit of a discount. And now apparently they shook hands and everybody's happy now, because obviously you can go in, and Costco usually has at the very front there like an Apple TV table or several. And they really have some good prices. I even just recently got some Apple AirPods Pro for my wife, and I think we saved like $20 or $30 on the price there at Costco. Anyway, just good stuff.
What I think is interesting is I always think of Costco and Sam's Club as the same idea, as being like bulk purchases, like the place that you go when you want to buy a whole bunch of something. And so it's always interesting to me when these things are there. When the personal story, when I graduated from law school a long time ago now, a bunch of people in my family, my grandparents on both sides, my parents, they all sort of pitched in to get and purchased for me as a present a baby grand piano, which is great because I love to play piano.
Whoa.
But they bought it at Sam's Club, of all places, the last place you would ever think to buy a piano. But it was a good discount. In fact, they got me the floor model, which had a little dent in it, so they saved some more money. But I still use that piano to this day. But whenever I tell people that the piano came from Sam's Club, they're always like, "Oh, did you have to buy like a case of them or something?"
Yeah,
like that?
right. Pianos in bulk.
Exactly. But I still love that piano.
So
Even they found the place that could get the best possible deal on it.
Wow,
not the place you would expect to buy a piano, and I still use it every day all this many years later. So
all right, that's a great story. Pianos in bulk. I love it. Last link that you had, because you always have a fun one at the end. I missed this video, and I'm so glad you linked to it. This is another video from Apple where what is it called? It's called data auction, right? So here, I'll open this up in YouTube. But it's great that they've done this before. before. It's Apple basically highlighting the fact that on the iPhone they will protect your privacy. This is really cool. This young lady goes into this room and they're auctioning off like her email tracking and her contacts and everything. What a neat little video here.
And I think it was just a week or two that we were talking about the video that Apple did this time last year called Tracked, which is another fantastic video of, the guy gets in his car and everywhere he buys something following him around. So I just think, these privacy can be a little bit complicated of a topic. And these ads that Apple has done just do a fantastic job of really bringing it home so that you understand what they're talking about and what you get from Apple versus some of their competitors. So it's plus I always like a clever, funny ad, no matter what.
Absolutely.
So in fact, we don't have it in the links today, but I mentioned it in the news post today that there's a company that is selling an ad for like this accessibility service.
Yes, you did.
And I don't want to give it away if you haven't clicked on it, but suffice it to say,
okay, we won't give it away.
User way. If you haven't clicked on that link yet, you might be surprised at what you hear. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Worth checking out.
So back to the privacy videos, just real quick. The reason that they're doing this is that you can go in and they're highlighting, like in the settings, there is mail privacy protection. So that's one of the things that you can protect your mail activity or turn it off or on. And so that's one of the things I just wanted to let people know, like that is the purpose of a lot of these ads, that you can go in and in some of the settings. We've talked about these before, where you can just say, don't track, like, ad tracking, transparency, all that kind of stuff that Apple throws in there, which is good stuff on there. Thanks for linking to the fun thing on there. In the know, here's my tip today. I recently had to go and switch this, and I think most people know that you can do this already. If I get a text message on my phone, many times, Jeff, I don't like to reply on my phone, especially if I've got to do a longer message. I like to reply either on my Mac or on my iPad because I've got a keyboard associated with those devices. Now, I've just done this so much that I almost take it for granted. If it's an iMessage, in other words, if it's coming from another user that is used in an Apple product, that typically will synchronize through all of my devices.
The blue circles.
But the blue bubbles, exactly. But if it's somebody that is not using an iPhone, for example, and they're using an Android phone or something else, that's the green bubbles, right? It doesn't automatically synchronize across all my devices. So I got a new iPad, not too long ago, and I had not turned this on. So one of the things that you can do is, if on your iPhone, because that's obviously the hub for any kind of text messages is the iPhone, but you can go into your settings and you can go down to messages and you can go to text message forwarding. And so you can go in there and it'll show you what other devices, Apple devices, that you have connected to your iCloud account. So here in this little Apple support page here, you can see this is what I did. There's John's MacBook Pro, and then there's John's iPad Pro. So all I had to do was go into my phone, go to settings, go to messages, go to text message forwarding, and I toggled on forwarding the text messages, usually the SMS, MMS, to my iPad. So that way now everything synchronizes. Although it works so well. Like I said, I almost take it for granted, especially with iMessages, because everything shows up in all of my text messages. But I like the fact that I can go to any device and see all my text message conversations. It's all the same. It's all synchronized. And it really, sometimes it pops up on all of them. That can get annoying, but you can control the notifications there. But if I see a message on my phone and I want to do a longer reply, then I can just jump directly onto my Mac or my iPad, which are typically close by me anyway, and I can just reply that way. So just want to let everybody know that you can turn that on. That's called text message forwarding.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And in fact, I remember a situation years ago now where, much like you described, I had a new iPad and I noticed that some text messages weren't showing up on my iPad, even though they were on my iPhone. And apparently I didn't have this turned on for some reason. So I went and turned it on. And of course, I now don't think about it. And so many of my text messages are the blue bubbles. I don't get a lot of green bubbles that I probably went a while before I even noticed it. But then it was really weird because I'm like, where is this message? I know that I communicated with one of my neighbors and she used Android. So it's a good tip to look out for. If you don't have it turned on, you should definitely have it turned on. I'm curious. I don't even know. Maybe Apple turns it on by default nowadays. I don't know. But if they don't, they should. But it's easy enough to check and see that you have it. So the tip that I have for today is a follow-up of something that I discussed last year. And we talked about it on episode 30 of this podcast back in December. But one of the things that is interesting about AirPods Pro, unlike the regular AirPods, is that with the AirPods Pro, the tips that go into your ear are removable. And Apple does this so that you can use either a small, medium, or large size. But I've never been a big fan of the Apple earbuds because I sort of find that they sort of move around in my ear and don't hold very well. And so I've been trying alternative tips really ever since I first got my first AirPods Pro a long time ago. And the ones that I tried out in last November, and I reported on them in December, and I mentioned it here in the podcast, were made by this company called Comply. And I mention it because they are just pure foam. I've tried some in the past that were foam underneath the silicone that you would have for the Apple earbuds, but these are just foam, and you just put them on the end. And I mentioned them because I just bought a new pair this week, because the ones that I got about 6-7 months ago, they were starting to, and this is what foam, this foam sort of stuff does over time. It started to fall apart. And I noticed yesterday that one of them was sort of like half torn or something. So that's fine. So I bought another pair. They're $25. You get 3 for $25. When I bought it last year, I bought a set of small, medium, large, because I wasn't sure which one I was going to use. I should have just guessed that I would want the large one, and that sure enough is what I wanted. So this time I bought just a set of 3 larges. So I should be good for another year and a half. So I guess they last about 6 or 7 months and they start to fall apart. But I have, of all that I have tried since the very first day I've had an AirPod Pro, for me, this has been the best. They don't move around in my ear.
Really?
They're very easy to snap on and snap off because they've got the connector on it automatically. In the old days, you had to sort of jimmy around, but this you just stick them on. So if you own AirPods Pro, but you don't feel like you have the best possible fit on the tip, my tip is to explore alternatives. And if you're looking for a specific one that just happens to work for my ears, it's this one, the ones made by Comply. And there's other companies that make foam ones too. You can probably get them for a little bit cheaper. I had heard good reviews of these and they've worked fantastically well for me. So I just thought it would be good to share a tip that, 6 months later, anytime I'm still using something this many months later, I really like it.
It's good.
Now, I will mention that there are rumors. There's always rumors. But there are rumors that Apple is looking to come out with a new version of AirPods Pro this fall. Is that going to happen? I have no idea. In fact, even if Apple wanted to do it with all of the supply disruptions in the world and everything else, they may have planned to do it this year, and it may be pushed off for another year or two. And then even if Apple does come out with new AirPods Pro, would they use the same tips or would they use something different? So who knows? So it's possible that I spent $25 on something in May. And if I were to upgrade later this year, which is also a big if, maybe I'd have to get something different. I mean, there's always uncertainties with any technology, but I'll just mention that out there in the world of AirPods. But I've been very happy with these tips. They have made the experience of using AirPods Pro, which I love. They have made it much better for me. So think about it. If
now I'm curious
on AirPods Pro.
I didn't think this is something I didn't think that I might be interested in. I've always been happy with the silicone that come with it. And by the way, Apple does supply like 3 different sizes, right? You got a small, medium, and large. I think, and usually the medium silicone are what's on the AirPods Pro. And frankly, that's always worked just fine for me. I have noticed that in some times, especially if I'm sweaty a little bit, that they'll get a little bit loose. I'm very interested in the foam aspects on this now. And by the way, I like on your article here, you talk about, here's a bonus tip, the iPhone has an ear tip fit test, and you show a little picture of it on here. Regardless of what you do, like, I don't know exactly how this works, but it can tell you if the tips that you're using create a good seal, especially for like noise canceling or that kind of a thing. And I forget, that's in the settings, I think, right? Somewhere, if you go into the settings, if you go into
settings and then into Bluetooth, and then you select the AirPods Pro, then you'll see some specific things that you can change on the AirPods Pro, like what happens when you click them, like what does it trigger Siri, or does it trigger changing the whether it's noise canceling or not noise canceling. But one of the things in there is to do a little test, and I have mixed emotions. I have mixed experiences with that test. Sometimes the test tells me that I don't have a perfect seal, but it actually sounds perfectly great to me. But on the other hand, if I think it sounds good, and if this report tells me that it's also a good seal, well, then I guess that's just confirmation that I'm hearing what I should be hearing. So
excellent, good tip, literally. Always fun talking with you, Jeff. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.